Hey guys, in today's episode, we'll be taking a look at a dark but incredibly important chapter in human history, World War I. But instead of looking at the whole war, we'll be focusing on a less talked about perspective, the profound impact that the war had on Germany, from politics, economics, to the psychology of an entire nation. At the beginning of the 20th century, Europe resembled a steam engine running at full capacity. Wealthy nations and powerful industrial empires thrived, but beneath the surface lay tensions, conflicts, and a pride that was difficult to contain. At that time, Germany was an emerging power. After unifying in 1871 under the leadership of Otto von Bismarck, Germany became a military and industrial powerhouse that no one could afford to underestimate. In just a few decades, Germany transformed from a loose federation into a modern empire, possessing some of Europe's leading heavy industries. They built a powerful navy, advanced in science and technology, and began to compete with the British Empire for global influence. The German Empire under Kaiser Wilhelm II held an unabashed ambition to become the dominant power in Europe. And to achieve that, they were willing to challenge the old order. However, Germany was not the only rising force in Europe at the time. The old powers like Britain, France, and Russia were not standing still. Nations engaged in an arms race formed tangled military alliances and harbored deep suspicions toward one another. Even a minor conflict could drag the entire continent into war. This period was known as the era of armed peace, where everyone spoke of peace, but everyone was preparing for war. Germany allied with Austria, Hungary, and Italy, forming the Triple Alliance. Meanwhile, Britain, France, and Russia created the opposing bloc known as the Triple Entente. These two camps stood face to face like two trains speeding toward each other on the same track. And then a spark ignited in a place that seemed insignificant: the Balkans. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. A single gunshot triggered a deadly chain reaction. Austria declared war on Serbia. Russia came to Serbia's defense. Germany supported Austria. France backed Russia. Britain stepped in to protect Belgium. And within just a few weeks, all of Europe was engulfed in war. The war began with promises that it would soon be over, that the soldiers would be home by Christmas. But that was only an illusion. Instead, the world plunged into a 4-year-long conflict that claimed over 20 million lives and shattered every illusion of civilization. And among all the nations swept into this maelstrom, Germany, the country that entered with ambition, ended up in collapse, poverty, and an unrelenting bitterness. But how could Germany, a strong and confident nation, fall so deeply into ruin? What happened on the battlefield? What unfolded after the armistice? And why did the defeat in World War I become the root of the greatest tragedy of the 20th century? Join me as we continue to explore in the next part why Germany entered World War I and what awaited them in the hell that was modern warfare. To understand why Germany decided to enter World War I, we need to look at its ambitions. The ambition to become an empire equal to Britain and France, both militarily and in terms of colonial possessions. After unifying in 1871, Germany rose rapidly. Its industry boomed, its science and technology advanced, and its military was disciplined and vast. However, one thing left them dissatisfied. Germany lacked a vast colonial empire like that of Britain or France. Under Kaiser Wilhelm II, Germany shifted its strategy. They abandoned Bismarck's cautious foreign policy and pursued a new path called Weltpolitik, world policy. Weltpolitik carried a very clear message. Germany would no longer stand on the sidelines of global affairs. They wanted the strongest navy, colonies in Africa, and an equal voice alongside the old empires. But Germany's imperial dream didn't stop at foreign ambitions. Within Europe, they felt encircled. To the west was France, the age-old enemy still harboring dreams of revenge after its defeat in 1871. To the east was Russia, with its massive population and formidable military potential. And as if by fate, those two nations, France and Russia, formed an alliance. Germany felt trapped in a pincer. To counter this, Germany strengthened the Triple Alliance with Austria, Hungary, and Italy, but in reality, only Austria-Hungary was a close ally, while Italy wavered and was never truly reliable. During this time, the German General Staff devised a plan that would later alter the entire course of history. the Schlieffen Plan. The Schlieffen Plan was a preemptive strike strategy. It assumed that if war broke out, Germany would be attacked on two fronts, France in the west and Russia in the east. And if forced to fight on both fronts simultaneously, Germany wouldn't have the resources to win. So they chose to strike first. Germany would concentrate its forces to quickly defeat France within a matter of weeks by bypassing defenses through Belgium, and then turn east to fight Russia, which was expected to take longer to mobilize. Put simply, Germany didn't want a two-front war, but if it had to fight one, it wanted to be the one to act first and strike hard. However, there was one crucial detail. Belgium was a neutral country, and when Germany invaded Belgium in 1914, it immediately triggered Britain, Belgium's guarantor, to declare war. Thus, from a military strategy, Germany had turned itself into an aggressor in the eyes of the international community. On top of that, they miscalculated its will to resist, Russia's mobilization speed, and Britain's economic power. It was as if Germany rushed into war with a dreamy belief that they could win quickly and decisively. They believed that within a few months, victory would be theirs and the enemy would be forced to surrender. But reality proved the opposite. The Schlieffen Plan failed from the very start. France held out longer than expected. Britain intervened more forcefully than Germany anticipated, and Russia mobilized faster than planned. Germany became bogged down on both fronts. The short war quickly turned into a full-scale war of attrition. And so Germany's imperial dream, once a vision full of pride and ambition, turned into a nightmare that lasted more than 4 years. There was no turning back. There was no quick victory. Instead, they were drawn into the most brutal war humanity had ever witnessed. That war and its unforeseen consequences were what changed the fate of Germany forever. In the next part, we'll explore how Germany fought during World War I, and why, no matter how resilient they were, they still had to face a bitter defeat. When war broke out in August 1914, Germany believed it had prepared everything perfectly. The Schlieffen Plan was set into motion. German divisions marched rapidly through Belgium, advancing toward Paris. In the early days, everything seemed to be going according to plan. But then, after just a few weeks, things began to go off course. Belgium resisted more fiercely than expected, slowing Germany's advance. Meanwhile, Britain deployed the British Expeditionary Force, BEF, to support France faster than Germany had anticipated. The turning point came in September 1914 at the Battle of the Marne. The German forces had advanced close to Paris, less than 50 kilometers from the capital. But under the command of General Joffre and with British support, the French launched a fierce counteroffensive. Germany was forced to retreat. The dream of defeating France within 6 weeks was shattered. After the failure at the Marne, World War I officially shifted into trench warfare, the most brutal and hopeless symbol of the conflict. Along a front stretching over 700 kilometers from the North Sea to the Swiss border, both sides dug millions of meters of trenches. The Western Front remained virtually static for the next 4 years. Life in the trenches was hell. Rain, mud, rats, disease, and the stench of corpses were everywhere. Soldiers lived deep underground for weeks, facing constant shelling, choking poison gas, and bloody assaults just to gain a few hundred meters of land. The year 1916 witnessed two of the most horrific battles, Verdun and the Somme. Verdun, a symbol of Germany's attempt to wear down French morale. Over 10 months, more than 700,000 casualties were suffered just to hold or capture a few miles of ground. The Somme, where British and French forces launched a counteroffensive. On the first day alone, the British lost over 57,000 soldiers, the bloodiest day in British military history. For Germany, every fallen soldier was a hole in its already limited resources. They also faced a British naval blockade, which caused severe famine among the population. In the following years, the German people endured extreme food shortages, known as the turnip winter, as even potatoes became so scarce that people had to eat turnips as a substitute. Yet Germany continued to hold on. They believed that if they could outlast the Allies, victory might still be within reach. The next turning point came at sea, when Germany decided to take a dangerous gamble: unrestricted submarine warfare. Germany's U-boats began sinking all Allied supply ships, including neutral vessels. Germany hoped to sever supply lines and force Britain to surrender, but the result was a diplomatic disaster. When the Lusitania, carrying many American citizens, was sunk, public outrage erupted in the United States. At first, President Wilson maintained a neutral stance, but by 1917, with the revelation of the Zimmermann telegram, in which Germany proposed an alliance with Mexico against the U.S., Washington could no longer stay on the sidelines. In April 1917, the United States officially declared war on Germany. For Germany, this was devastating news. They would now face an enemy with vastly superior economic power, industry, and manpower. Even so, Germany threw everything into one final offensive in early 1918, the Spring Offensive, Ludendorff Offensive. They redeployed their entire force from the Eastern Front after Russia withdrew from the war following the October Revolution. Hundreds of thousands of German soldiers launched powerful attacks, pushing deep into French territory. At first, they achieved significant victories, but Germany sacrificed sustainability for speed. Their elite troops were depleted, supplies ran dry, and once American forces arrived in full strength, Germany no longer had the power to resist. By late 1918, Germany was forced to retreat. The soldiers' morale was exhausted, uprisings erupted on the home front, and Germany's allies collapsed one by one. Finally, on November 11, 1918, Germany signed the armistice in a railway carriage at Rethons. The war they believed would be won in just a few weeks dragged on for over 4 years, claiming the lives of more than 2 million German soldiers, leaving the country in ruins and the entire society utterly exhausted. But the true tragedy was only beginning. The armistice was not the end. What awaited Germany ahead was the verdict of Versailles. After 4 years of fierce fighting, Germany, with all its military and industrial might, could not win. The German army was exhausted, the economy shattered, and society was torn apart. But although the war had ended, another tragedy awaited them, a verdict that was not just the result of military defeat, but a national humiliation. On November 11, 1918, Germany was forced to sign the armistice. But that was only the end of one war and the beginning of another within the very heart of Germany itself. They didn't just lose the battle, they were treated as the culprits of all the tragedies. And from this verdict, Germany would have to pay not only with blood, but with the destruction of its own pride and self-respect. And from this defeat, no one could have foreseen that the seeds of an even greater disaster would be sown, a disaster that the entire world would have to bear in the years that followed. In the next part, we will explore the consequences of the defeat and the Treaty of Versailles, and how this verdict crushed the peace, making the resurgence of extremism an unavoidable reality. Join me in the next episode as we continue to explore the Treaty of Versailles, where Germany's humiliation was officially written into history, and from there, an even worse war began to take shape.